Our word of the week this week is huperenkunomenon. Let's take a look. Huperenkunomenon is a participle, and it means overflowing or running over. It comes from the passive verb huperenkunomai, which comes from the active verb huperenkuno. But huperenkuno does not occur in the Septuagint version of the Old Testament or in the New Testament. The only occurrences of this word are in the passive. So if you want to look at it in the Old Testament, you can look at Proverbs chapter 5, verse 16. And today we're going to look at our word of the week in Luke chapter 6, verse 38. The word of the week's not that interesting apart from its use in this verse and the dynamic of how it interrelates with two other participles. So let's take a look. This is Luke chapter 6, verse 38 from the ESV. Give, and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put in your lap, for with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. So this comes right on the heels of don't judge lest you be judged. The same way you judge is the way you'll be judged. Then we're told the way that you give is the way that you'll receive, etc. But let's take a look at this phrase that includes our word of the week. And it says in Koine, metron kalon, pepiesmenon, sesalumenon, huperenkunomenon. That's a mouthful, isn't it? It's a lot of, you can tell by the shared endings, these are all passive participles. But what we're going to see here is we have two perfect tense passive participles followed by a present tense passive participle. And we'll talk about the significance of that when we get to the participles. Let's go back to our good measure. Metron, measure, kalon, good. So a measure, a good one. And then the participles are going to describe to us what constitutes this good measure. What makes this measure good? What makes it kalon? And so the three things that we're told about it, remember the first two are perfect tense, so it's an action that was continual in the past, and the results thereof carry on into the present. So let's envision for a moment that we're at the market and we're selling wheat. And depending on where you live in the world, you're selling it by the quart or by the liter. And you have a container. It's the measure that you use. And we're told that this good measure is good after having been pressed down. So you dig the scoop into the wheat and you press on the material at the top. Why? So that you know the whole thing is being filled. And then the next one is after having been shaken. Like, you ever buy a bag of chips and wonder why there's this much chips in a bag this big, right? So there's air space in there to protect the chips in that case. But when you're buying wheat, you don't want air space to protect the wheat. So we're told after being pressed down, after being shaken, those are our two perfect tense passive participles. We get to our present tense passive participle, and that one says that it's overflowing, it's running over. After those two other steps have been taken, the container is still rounded at the top. There's still more wheat than room for wheat. Okay? That's what constitutes, in this context, the good measure, the metron kalon. The fact that after you've taken steps to fill it as much as you could fill it, to sift out any of the air spaces and compact it in there, there's still more than is required. If you do any baking, you'll notice in recipes, you'll have measurements. And so let's say you're told to put in a teaspoon of baking powder. The presumption is that you're going to scoop the teaspoon, take the back of a knife and strike it off so that it's level and it's exactly a teaspoon. But if it says a heaping teaspoon, you're going to dig it in there and whatever's heaped up on the top gets left. It's more than a teaspoon. It's what might be called a generous measure. If you were cutting a board in a construction job, somebody might tell you to leave it proud or leave the line, leave a little extra, right? So that's what we're talking about. The good measure is the measure that you've taken steps to make sure has extra. It's not just honest measure. It's not just striking off and giving what was bargained for. It's doing everything you can to make sure that the person is getting more than they bargained for. That's what Jesus says in Luke 6, makes it a good measure, a metron kalon. Pretty spectacular. So one last nugget before we go. The next part of the verse says, if you do this sort of thing, if you give, it'll be given to you, right? You'll get this good measure. And it says, will be put into your lap. And the ESV leaves out the movement of this verb. So let's take a quick look at it. Dosusin, eis ton kolpon humon. Dosusin, they shall put into your lap. Who are they? Who is this they of which you speak? And that introduces us to this great little concept, the indefinite plural. You've heard somebody say that they're going to do something and someone else says, oh, they'll never let you do that. Who are they? They whom? It's that generic any they, right? They will put into your lap. People, rational people who see that you're a giver of more than is required will want to give to you more than is required, right? So that's the they, the indefinite plural. Any they who's reasonable would act that way. So what's our word of the week? Our word of the week is hyperenkonomenon, overflowing, running over. And it's the mark of a good measure. After it's been pressed down, after it's been shaken, if it's still running over the top, you know you've given a good measure. Hope that was good for you. Until next time, Karis Kairene, you mean grace and peace to you.